So, good morning, everybody. And can I just welcome you to our annual VCHA event, Raising the Bar Higher. And it's so good to see so many people on the line today. And I'm told that we got 400 who have registered for the event, which I think is fantastic. As people will know, this started in 2017, and we've now had 9 events, 4 workshops and 5 national events, and so far have had over 2,000 people who've attended either virtually or face-to-face. My team now consists of 16, a mix of healthcare professionals and veterans, and it really is a tight-knit group who are clearly delivering. And I'd just like to do a few thank yous at the beginning, which would be really useful to me. I want to thank Guy and the team like Laura, Anna Marie, Helen and Marvin, who pulled the staff together for this. I want to thank the Lord General Dannatt, Kate Davies and clearly Deborah Elliott. I also wanted to thank the Minister, Louise Sandher-Jones, and all our partners in the third sector, independents, hospices and care homes, and also the ROHT and Julian for hosting us there. What I think is brilliant is we've now got a team where we've now received 100% accreditations and we're widening scope. And you're going to hear a lot about that this morning, and also about the training team that we've appointed. I've got huge respect for this group, seen what they've done already, and they're going to be hit the ground running in November, which I think is going to be brilliant. I also want to thank Nikki Murdoch, actually, who's the Armed Forces NHS public patient voice. And also the most important people is the NHS staff and all of you who are coming today and all going above and beyond and delivering for our veterans. So many thanks. I hope you enjoyed today. I'm really excited about the programme that Guy and the team have put together, and I look forward to speaking to you a little later. And finally, just a shout out for Linus and Jessie. Linus has been really leading our rehabilitation programme, and they've just had a baby girl, so well done, Linus. So with that note, can I hand back to you, please, Guy?
Great, thanks, Tim. That's very kind. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's NHS National Veterans Healthcare Alliance annual conference, which this year is themed Raising the Bar Higher, which directly links to the Shavaz report, actually written by Professor Tim Briggs, the VCHA National Chair. And since 2014, we've actually come a long way. This will be our first conference since the publication of the NHS 10-year health plan, Fit for the Future, part of the government's health mission to build a health service for the future. The plan sets out how the government will reinvent the NHS through 3 radical shifts: hospital to community, analog to digital, sickness to prevention. It is our job today, and every day actually, to ensure that all members of the armed force community experience the benefits of these 3 shifts. It must be at the top of everyone's priority list, and I know that the VCHA is well placed to support this ambitious transformation programme. Patients are the heart of everything we do, so it's not lost on me or the team today that the 17th of September is World Patient Safety Day, which calls for global solidarity and a concerted action by all countries and international partners to improve patient safety. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Guy Benson, the National Team Leader for the Veterans Healthcare Alliance and the newly announced NHS National Armed Forces Healthcare Training and Education Team. My background includes a full military career in the Army, both as a soldier and an officer with multiple operational tours. I joined Professor Tim Briggs and the NHS 5 years ago, and to be honest, I've never ever looked back. Over the course of the next 6 hours or so, I will aim to provide you all a handrail through this year's very ambitious VCHA annual conference. The aim of this year's conference is to provide both a strategic and operational level overview, whilst at the same time provide updates and importantly demonstrate progress and impact in order to set the conditions for driving down healthcare inequalities, unwarranted variation and disadvantage across the healthcare system. It also links into our statutory duty as well. In terms of housekeeping, I just want to say for those speakers, please keep all your cameras off and microphones muted unless you are down to speak. Our moderators will change all the slides for you, but please prompt them with the term next slide, please. In terms of the audience, all your cameras and mics are already automatically turned off or muted. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, which is at the top of your screen. And if your question isn't answered straight away, we'll have a dedicated panel of discussion later where your question will be put to the speakers. If we don't manage to answer the question today, it will be followed up by the end of this week by a member of the team direct to your email. The team will also aim to share a video of the conference within 10 working days. And finally, social digital channels, please use the hashtag NHS Veteran Aware. And the final point is there are QR codes along the presentation. Please do complete the survey. In terms of the programme, as I said, very ambitious. Tim has pushed me hard to pull this together. We've got a record 21 speakers from the strategic, operational and workforce levels. You will also hear from a member of the House of Lords, General Dannatt, a former Chief of the General Staff, a government minister, senior NHS leaders, independent sector leaders, and of course, the workforce. You will see that I've split today's conference into 3 sessions. And session 1 is the strategic update. Session 2 is the raising awareness. And session 3 is progress and impact. All clearly pinned to our patient, and that is really important. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to our patron, General the Lord Richard Dannatt, GCB, CBE, MC, DL. Lord Dannatt served 40 years in the British Army, concluding as Chief of the General Staff, the professional head of the Army. He has since served as Constable of the Tower of London, sits in the House of Lords and continues to be a strong advocate for all of the armed forces community. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General the Lord Dannatt. General, over to you.
Guy, thank you very much. Well, Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. May I add my welcome to the annual National Veterans Covenant Healthcare Alliance Conference, or the VCHA using the shorthand. It's really good to see such a strong attendance from so many people who share a passion for our military community. And I know there are many old friends and colleagues out there who are participating in today's event, who have been supporters of the Armed Forces Covenant for many years. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you today. And a special welcome to our new Minister for Veterans and Service People, Louise Sandher-Jones. Just over a week into the job, Minister, you're particularly welcome to this conference, and thank you for agreeing to address it so early in your tenure. We wish you all the very best while you carry out those important duties in the Ministry of Defence. Now, today is all about our common aim to ensure that we continue to raise the awareness, understanding and due regard, and therefore the credibility of the Armed Forces Covenant, while at the same time reinforcing that under the VCHA we can continue to improve armed forces serving personnel, reservists, veteran and spousal family healthcare, whilst helping to raise NHS standards for all. Our armed forces continue to step forward to support our nation in a very dangerous world, and our veterans remain at the heart of the voluntary effort in many communities. As a result of this, the Armed Forces Covenant, and indeed the VCHA, has never been more vital. Partners across the UK in the public, private and charitable sectors have continued to support those who serve or have served, and of course their families. As we know, there's already excellent work going on across England. We're building strong relationships between local authorities, the NHS, the military and military charities. But as we will hear today, through continuous quality improvement, further partnerships, collaboration and coordination, so much more is possible. We must continue to make progress and chase perfection. I'm delighted to know that all of our NHS trusts are now part of the VCHA, which is nothing short of outstanding, by the way. And all trusts have now signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant. Indeed, Amanda Pritchard, the previous Chief Executive of NHS England, reaffirmed and re-signed the Armed Forces Covenant in September 2024 in person at the Royal Hospital, Chelsea. In addition, the planned widening of the Armed Forces Covenant into law in the next Armed Forces Bill is welcomed and should be supported right across the nation. The Covenant is most certainly a force for good, as is the Veterans Covenant Healthcare Alliance. Where our military have supported us, it's only fair and right that we now support them. And at its core, that is what the Armed Forces Act does. However, care needs to be taken that the Covenant process and indeed VCHA accreditation does not just become another box-ticking exercise. I'm proud to say that from what I've been briefed on by both Professor Tim and Guy, this is not the case. So my challenge to you all remains to work together to make our country the best place in the world for healthcare for our armed forces community. So this conference today offers a chance to make a substantial difference for the military community and a real difference to those with the greatest needs. This is our opportunity to improve our delivery of the Armed Forces Covenant alongside the VCHA and make it a reality. This will make a positive contribution to the lives of service people, our reservists, our veterans and their families who continue to support us and our nation so selflessly. Finally, before I hand back to Guy, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers who are taking part today and look forward to their updates and frankly most inspiring stories. Of course, it's always invidious to single out individuals, but I want to say a heartfelt thank you especially to Professor Tim Briggs and to Guy Benson and his team, who have all worked so tirelessly over the last decade to improve the healthcare for our military community. And I know that there are many more, Professor Tim has already alluded to many of them, who work behind the scenes. Of course, at the heart of defence are the sailors, soldiers, airmen and women, both regular and reserves, who continue to defend our country and our way of life at home, at sea and in operations overseas. I also want to shine a light on our service families, who continue so steadfastly to support those who serve. So, in conclusion, to all our military community, NHS staff, the independent and the third sector, I pay tribute and thank you all for your service. I'll now hand back to Guy, who will manage the programme for the rest of the day. Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you very much, General Richard. Really appreciated your opening address. So we're now going to crack on with the conference. I want to hand over to Sarah Kirkby. I remain keen actually to shine a light and be inclusive for all of the armed force community. And as such, I wanted to introduce a spouse and actually a working mum, Sarah Kirkby. She is one of the regional trainers for the VCHA who covers the east of England. Sarah is a nurse, project manager and educational facilitator, as well as a member of the armed force community herself. She'll be sharing her very personal military family story with us today, which highlights the challenges that some of the armed force community can face. Over to you, Sarah.
Morning. Thank you, Guy. I'll just take control. Brilliant. Hello all, it's so wonderful to see so many of you here online today, and a thank you again, Guy, for the introduction. I've been asked today to share part of my story as a military family, and I feel very honoured to do so. Today I'm going to talk to you about my experiences as a member of the Armed Forces community and how it has impacted the various parts of my life. This is all very day-to-day stuff, but I want to share its impact on how it's on my career and my profession as a registered nurse, explore what it has meant for me as a wife and as a mother. But ultimately, I want to tie all of this into explaining how now, as the East of England regional trainer with the NHS Armed Forces Healthcare Training and Education Programme, my own lived experience will continue to impact my involvement and delivery of the project. I graduated from the University of Leeds back in 2014 with a BSc in adult nursing. My first nursing role was in Nottingham, but during this time and shortly after moving there, I felt a call back up to Leeds. A possible soldier in Catterick may have also been to answer for that. I returned to the Leeds General Infirmary, working on a very busy, fast-paced ward with long hours and lots of overtime, which meant limited chances to see that boyfriend, who was soon to become my fiancé and is now my husband. After making one weekend together in 3 months, we decided something needed to change. Little did I know back then it was going to be a good training experience for our marriage. Of course, him leaving the military wasn't an option, and so I started looking at nursing roles that would mean we had time together at weekends. I guess this was the beginning of my career, being shaped by a connection to the armed forces. Sacrifice almost sounds too grand a word, but I guess there have been many sacrifices made along the way. I gained a distinction in my postgraduate certificate in clinical assessment whilst working in Leeds, but was unable to continue the further 2 years to complete a master's as I moved up to Catterick to be with my husband. I took a band cut when moving to Bristol after he transferred and we moved to Wiltshire, and I left an incredible research job which I loved on another posting move to Essex. In 11 years, I've had 7 jobs with 4 different NHS trusts, one with the MOD and another with the third sector. And although this now means that my CV could be published as a novel, it has led to a very varied and interesting career so far. Of course, holding down a job and managing the day-to-day, as it can be for anyone, is overwhelming at times, and I think more challenging when you're away from your partner and your family. Military life isn't the easiest on a relationship, and I'm sure many of you here can relate to that statement. It was back in 2017, at what feels now the very young age of 23, that I married my husband. We still lived apart at this point, having bought a house, but living unaccompanied, mainly because it was extremely difficult for unmarried couples at this time to be issued with a military house. When I managed to secure a job after we married in Catterick, we were so excited to move into our first pad. Little did I know from now on, my life was about to be full of magnolia walls and green wire fencing. Of course, the move to Catterick happened to coincide with my husband deploying on Optosca, a UN peacekeeping tour in Cyprus for 6 months. I started a new job with the MOD and tried to integrate into a new community, which was not as easy as I thought it would be, and I did it alone. A story many military partners will be familiar with. But we needed to prioritise our future as a couple, and this at the time was the only way we could do it. We spent 2 years in Catterick before moving to Lynham and then on to Essex. Really, we've done relatively well. Some of my friends have moved 5 or 6 times in the same time frame. And to be honest, despite the multiple career moves and periods of time apart, I love being a military wife, although you will never hear me refer to myself as a dependent. But I'm so proud to be a part of this community. The moves don't necessarily get easier, but I think you get better at them. And I always promised myself on every move that I would see each new relocation as a new adventure, a new place to explore and an opportunity to make new memories. It wasn't until 2020 when the negative impacts of this transient lifestyle really hit home for us as a couple. Becoming parents was always something my husband and I had dreamed of, but we also both knew it was going to be more difficult for us due to a genetic trait in the family. In 2018, we were referred to a local genetics team when we were living in Catterick to identify what options would be available to us. Following that appointment with Leeds, we were given a plan and told that once pregnant, we were to contact our local genetics team and they would provide us with the required testing that was available to us on the NHS. And so 2 years later, in 2020, we were blessed to fall pregnant and did exactly as we were told. We rang the local genetics clinic to us in Wiltshire, where we were now living. But upon sharing our news with them, we were promptly told that their processes were completely different, and there were several things we should have done before even getting pregnant. In fact, we were made to feel that we had been completely irresponsible and were asked, why would you have not planned better for this? We felt awful and to blame for this stressful mess we were now in. We actually spent 5 whole weeks wondering whether the required testing of our baby was now even a possibility. We needed to obtain blood tests from family members. We had to arrange this with their GPs. None of the hospitals would transport the samples, and so we ended up driving up and down from Wiltshire, collecting them and dropping them off at the lab. We threw everything into it, and despite me suffering with hyperemesis as well and having multiple admissions to hospital, we powered on. Tragically, at 13 weeks, we lost our precious baby. I won't talk about that now, largely because it's too hard. But in conjunction with this, we also lost our father-in-law to COVID 3 months later. And a month after that, we were told we were moving to Essex. This was despite asking to stay in Wiltshire to continue with our treatment at the genetics clinic, and also for me to keep my job, which I loved. Many of you here will have experienced the same thing. This is day-to-day life for us. And we all know that ultimately, if they are needed in a post, you are moving, which we did. Fortunately, a transfer of care did happen when we moved to Wiltshire. When we moved from Wiltshire to Essex, and we were referred to a hospital in London. At an appointment, several months later, we decided we would try IVF. Anyone who has gone through this or known people who have gone through this will understand the rigidity of the schedule. And I was left truly terrified that the moment they found out my husband was serving, they would pull it, because due to his job, he could not be relied upon to make every appointment. In fact, we tried to conceal this information, if I'm honest, and it clearly hadn't been handed over on the referral. In hindsight, it was actually COVID restrictions that were ongoing that helped us, because for each of my appointments, I was not actually allowed to be accompanied. Looking back, that's quite sad, really, to see that having to go on my own meant less stress for us because he didn't need to be around and we didn't need to worry about that. But we carried on, as we always have done, as we always do. And despite a hard failed first cycle, we miraculously fell pregnant in 2023. Despite the difficult journey, we were so blessed to be greeted by a beautiful baby girl, and our dreams really did come true. So why am I sharing this with you? Because this is just one story from our community where you can see that the unique challenges of military life have significantly impacted a healthcare journey. I, of course, am and forever will be eternally grateful for the NHS. Ultimately, without them, we would not have our daughter. But reflecting on this story, there are things that could have been done better. And these things could have been simple, but it would have had the biggest impact. So where are we today? Well, I'm the proud mother of an almost 2-year-old who, despite her unbelievable sass, is the most resilient, emotionally intelligent little girl. I'm navigating life working full-time, as well as sometimes a full-time single parent miles away from family. I'm managing tantrums and the separation anxiety she feels when my husband is away, as he is now. She is growing up and understanding what it means when daddy isn't here and how that makes her feel. And that, you'll all appreciate, is very hard. But what I have found so difficult since becoming a parent is the reality that the military will always come first. Unlike other jobs, for a serving person, their service has to be their first priority above all else. Knowing that regardless of what might be happening at home, the military must come first is a hard reality to swallow. And that has been my reality time and time again. I've spent many visits to the GP and sometimes to A&E with a poorly baby, completely alone, when my husband is away. Life is dictated by service, but we must remember that's not just for the person serving, it's for their family too. Recently, I sat torn on the day the promotion board was announced, with half of me hoping and praying he would pick up, and half of me hoping and praying he wouldn't, because I couldn't face a possible move. Not when I just started a new job and we got our daughter finally settled into nursery. And now we're looking to live unaccompanied so that I have family support when he is away. These conflicted feelings will continue to pop up throughout military life, ones of enormous pride, but also of exhaustion from sacrifices that are continually made. It is hard, of course it is, and so many of you know this. And this isn't a woe is me an ending, because I also know how lucky I am to have the life that I have, to met the people I have along the way, and to have had the jobs I've had opportunity to grow in. But most importantly, I have a family I'm so blessed to have, and the military plays a huge part in all that, and all the good things I have in my life too. I'm also very lucky to be a member of this fantastic team who are, each one of them, passionate about making a difference for the armed forces community. Alongside our VCHA core team, we are championing the community and raising awareness of the challenges that they may face. In my story, I can see the 3 following things could have altered our experience entirely, and this is what we want to support staff to be aware of. Ask the question. I have never yet been asked the question as to whether I'm a part of the community. The pressure of self-identifying and the fear of consequence would have made a huge difference if someone had asked us this question. We must ask patients at each new interaction and provide them an opportunity to identify themselves should they wish to. Recording. If my status had been recorded at any point on our journey, then this would have been clear to healthcare staff and could have supported better care planning. Recording status helps with transfer of care and improves continuity, but it also may mean a member of the community does not have to repeat their story over and over. And finally, connection. Connecting our story from trust to trust in referral, but also connecting us to support. Looking at you all here today, it is obvious there is an enormous amount of support available to our community. Often it's just about connecting people to it. The NHS does an incredible job, and we see pockets of amazing practice happening across the country, and we have to remember that. But there is always an opportunity to raise the bar higher, to reduce disadvantage and unwarranted variation that this community experiences. For me, knowing all of you are here engaged and enthusiastic makes me so excited and optimistic for the future of Armed Forces healthcare, but for me more personally, for our future as a military family. Thank you for listening to me today and for giving me the time to tell my story.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. That was an emotional roller coaster ride. Really appreciate you sharing your story, your family story. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hand over to Minister Louise Sandher-Jones, who actually has just taken up the role as the Armed Forces Veteran and Personnel Minister. I think what I can say is that she was a fast-track civil servant. She joined the Army as an Army officer in the Intelligence Corps. She'd been working in the commercial sector in intelligence. And of course, in July 24, she became an MP. And then I think 9 days ago, she was offered and accepted this role. So I'm really pleased. I'm hoping that we are the first to grab hold of you, Louise, but over to yourself, Louise.
Just about the first, yes. Thank you so much, Guy, for that very kind introduction. And I just want to say a huge thank you to yourself and everything that the team has achieved. And I just want to say it's a huge honour for me to have this role. And I'm looking forward to doing everything I can in this role to support veterans. So I'm delighted to join you all today. Apologies online. So soon after my appointment as Minister for Veterans and People. As we all know, we've got our service behind us. We have loved ones who served in the military, and it's so important that we are here to support as we go forwards. When we are asked about what is important in life, I think many of us would say it is our loved ones, it's our family, it's our friends, and also it is our health and our quality of life. And so that's why when back in the last century, when the Second World War was won and service personnel came home and they did vote for a Labour government and who stood on a manifesto that declared the best health services should be available free for all. This was a manifesto that promised a national health service, which I believe, as an act of solidarity between everybody across our United Kingdom, it remains one of our nation's proudest ever achievements. 80 years later, your work through this alliance continues to deliver on that promise for the members of our armed forces community, from those serving to those who are veterans. And I have many friends from my time in the army, and I served in Germany, in Afghanistan, and I did my fair share of lugging heavy kit across the Black Mountains of Brecon. And so I've got a good insight into the unique stresses that military service puts on the human body and the human mind as well. And that's why, therefore, your work to ensure no one's health is disadvantaged by their service is and will remain so important. So I was delighted to learn that earlier this year we passed the milestone of getting all 205 NHS trusts accredited as NHS Veteran Aware, which is a fantastic achievement. So this nationwide coverage really should be a source of pride for everybody here who's been involved with the work of the Alliance. Because it means right now across this country, there should be no one in an NHS waiting room from our armed forces community that feels like their service is invisible and their situation is not understood. Now, to be clear, this isn't about special treatment. It's about recognising that special public service and getting the treatment that's right for you and making sure that nobody who's either serving or a veteran or their families, again, who have to sacrifice a lot for their loved ones, is disadvantaged by their commitment to our security in this country. So as the new Minister for Veterans and People, I'm really, really committed to the ideals of the Armed Forces Covenant and to ensuring that members of our community are not disadvantaged in any walk of life. I know that delivering on that vision takes all of us and will continue to take all of us. And so as I approach my new role as a minister, I think back and remember to the beginning of my army journey at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, that had the motto, serve to lead. And this has stuck with me, and it's something that has stuck with me as an MP. And what this means is my door is always open to serve everybody in our armed forces community. So I look forward to working with you, to strengthening this alliance, building on the fantastic work that we've all done so far on Op Courage, Op Restore, Op Nova, Op Valor, all fantastic initiatives to deliver the best possible health outcomes for our armed forces community. So thank you very much for having me here to speak. And once again, thank you very much for all the hard work that you have done so far and have yet to do, I'm sure.
Minister, thank you. I really appreciate your kind words. I think you'll do a fantastic job, and we are here to support you. So do please reach out. Next, I want to hand over to another inspirational woman, actually, and leader. Kate Davies, CBE, is the National Director for Armed Forces, Sexual Assault Services, Health and Justice, and Armed Forces Assault Service and Abuse Services within NHS England. Kate has been at the vanguard of creating national services like Op Courage, Op Restore, and of course the governance wraparound for healthcare in respect of the VCHA and indeed veteran-friendly GP services. She's ensuring inclusive care for the armed forces community. Kate, welcome. Over to you.
Hi Guy, hi Tim, hi everyone. It's really good to be here, and my gosh, is it really that many events that we've had, Tim, 9 of them. It's absolutely stunning to be here yet again at the 9th one. So look, morning everybody. Yeah, as Guy has very beautifully said, and thank you very much for the introduction, I'm Kate Davies. I'm the National Director in NHS England for the Armed Forces commissioning and development, both strategically and operationally. Just to confuse everyone, I also have other portfolios. So I'm the National Commissioner for Health and Justice, everything that is commissioned within the criminal justice system, and also in immigration and migration, and also sexual assault services. So I think a bit like, I guess, Louise and Sarah before me, give a busy woman a job and you get it done. But look, what is really important is to champion everything that is part of the VCHA event today. I love the title, Raising the Bar. It's something that we've constantly said, I think, Tim, Guy, Deborah, all of the armed forces team within NHS England, because I think as part of my strategic overview, what I really want to do is also emphasize what it is and how far we've come. Now, if you're part of the 300 people that are listening to this, you've probably heard me say this before, but I really don't think we cannot stop reminding everybody that to get to the place that we're in now, and as the minister said, get to the place where there is still much more to do, and particularly Sarah's story tells us that as well, then we have to remember how hard it has got to get to where we've got to within the NHS and the military collaboration with lived experience, with clinical leadership, with charities, with many, many staff people, and also for serving, for families and carers of serving, for reservists, for families and carers of reservists, and also for veterans and their families. And I am that person that remembers very well coming into this post, which was the first unique post as a director in armed forces for the NHS England body, that we started with very little. We started with a lot of good work. We started with a lot of patchy work. We started with a lot of gaps. And so I think the strategic overview today is let's make quite sure ultimately that the one big action, Tim and colleagues, that we have to maintain is to maintain everything we've achieved at this point. I've had the pleasure of working for many governments, and every one of them has been really supportive and championing what that means for the military community. But as part of the introduction, I don't think that probably any of us are in a place at this moment on September the 17th, 2025, where we haven't got such a global spotlight on both military activity, global activity, and the needs and the concerns and the championing and the amazing, kind of respect that we have for armed forces, men and women and their families across the UK, but also across many parts of the world as well. Look, that's, I suppose, the reality check. But as we go forward, what we are there is about strengthening that health and well-being and making quite sure that, as Guy said before, that our services are fit for the future. So just one thing, in my introduction, you probably got the slide up of Kate Davies. I'm a Davies with an E, you know, Guy. I'm very happy with my Welsh roots just from the agenda. I always have a little bit of a giggle when I not got me E in me Davies. So just giving you that for a bit of a home bit about my background as well. So I'm not actually from a military background. I'm not someone that has served, and there'll be many people that have today. And the reason I'm saying that, as well as the massive respect and the absolute essential co-production with lived experience, men and women, always within the NHS, is that actually what's really important is not to think that for the whole of NHS services, that we leave it to people who have once served, or we leave it to somebody who is currently serving, or a member of staff or is a family member of serving. It is absolutely essential that the hundreds of thousands of people that work within the NHS and the millions and millions of people who are patients of the NHS, also who aren't military backgrounds necessarily in the way that the amazing people that we're going to hear today from, also are there to understand the equity and the importance of working with our families and carers from the military community. And that is one of, I think, the proudest achievements that the Armed Forces team for NHS England, of which there are only 13 of them, have worked amazingly for the last 10 years to bring everyone with us as part of embedding what the NHS should be for the future for both staff and patients, both serving, non-serving, who have served, who haven't served, and who will never serve, and for their children and their families at the same time. Okay, let's move on. Thank you. Just aware of the time. So a lot of that I'm going to say as part of the formal presentation has already been touched on by Lord Dannatt or by Sarah or Guy or Tim and also the Minister before. But I think it is really important to put it in the context of particularly the 10-year plan, the Strategic Defence Review, but also the NHS Department of Health and Social Care Change Programme, which I'm particularly going to use this event with many hundreds of people to put very clearly where we are, where we're going, and absolutely the safety and the importance and the presence that will continue within the NHS changes of the Armed Forces work, commissioning and the community, and what that means within the NHS. Okay, next slide. Thank you very much. So just to recap, there is a larger document. Many of you have already seen. If you haven't, then hopefully I'm just whetting your appetite to have a look at it and give it a bit of a read. We've certainly done some brilliant presentations with our lived experience panel with Nikki Murdoch, with the clinical team, with both Dr. Jonathan Leach and Shahan Hadrachi, and Deborah Elliott and the team have constantly been supporting both the engagement along with our comms team and brilliant support from Andrea Collins, but also the elements of what that means with the real ambition that is there within the 10-year plan. What you won't see in the 10-year plan is a section on the armed forces, commissioning, development, services, roles, or elements of that. That's not because it isn't embedded across everything. There is actually not a lot that has actually been identified. That was the model of the 10-year plan, to keep it about the ambition across all elements of patient pathways and care as part of the work going forward. But I think what we do have is the Armed Forces Covenant, which very clearly is part of the ongoing legislation changes when the legislation goes through the House from a bill to an act. So that's really positive. Thank you. Next slide. Thanks very much. So Guy's already mentioned the 3 shifts from hospital community analog to digital and sickness to prevention. But what I think is really important within the 10-year plan, that we are there, if you read all of these elements, to make things actually much more neighbourhood and population based. And if we go back to just Sarah's amazing story, and thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing that. And I'm really proud that we've done a lot of work around the maternity pathway with our serving community, and in fact an award-winning project because of the voices of many men, women, families, and what that means for babies and for children, and also for women and families and men who have lost their children as well, and I'm really sorry about that, and I've had that within my family as well, and I know how difficult and lifelong that is too. So ultimately, I think what we are there to ensure is that the armed forces community and the pathway, wherever people access the NHS within the 10-year plan, can benefit from the work that is there to support the whole community and the whole ambition as we go forward. If we look at the digital element of the 10-year plan, then the work that we're doing with the MOD, with Defence Medical Services, with our own digital technical solutions team on what that is around the whole element of the read codes around for the first time since the Armed Forces team has been there for many years, having that element of have you ever served, your status, if you like, as part of within the Armed Forces community and also as a veteran. But Sarah is right. If we don't ask, if we don't say, have you ever served, one of the biggest campaigns, one of the biggest areas of downloading that campaign in any NHS campaign in the last couple of years, which is quite something when you're thinking about COVID and cancer and other elements which are there are just as important around mental health and neurodiversity, for example. But this campaign was one of the ones that was looked at and also distributed more than any other. So the digital element really is having that impact. And of course, sickness to prevention is key. And if you move around the country a lot as a serving man and woman, if you come from transition of serving to being a civilian and you haven't ever necessarily used the NHS services in that way, how are you going to know what it is to do to navigate across acute trusts, across mental health trusts, across primary care and op services? That is so important to make quite sure that that sickness to prevention element is absolutely strong and robust. Thank you. I'll keep going. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. Other speakers already looked at it, but I think alongside the strategic defence review, we've now got, I think, and I know that there will be speakers that will follow today, a really close and really well embedded relationship between the Department of Health and Social Care, NHS, and the MOD, Defence Medical Services, our military charities, particularly, who are absolutely front and centre about the collaboration with the whole of the NHS, but also as part of patient pathways and care and support in many areas. And what we need to make quite sure that we do create that whole force plan and also identify where we can absolutely get in front and central of elements together. So some of those examples with the Defence Review is looking at when people are being recruited into the military community and how we get tighter systems with our GPs and with other elements of sharing with consent, of course, people's patient records as part of the recruitment campaign. Just an example of how the two elements mesh together. Thank you. Next slide. So what I think is important for me to do today is to just, as the director responsible for the Armed Forces National Team currently, and also responsible for helping alongside Department of Health ministers and also the exec team in modelling what does the chain programme mean for Armed Forces healthcare. And so what I thought was helpful today, and I'm not going to go through every one of those bullet points, but to give you very clearly what this means going forward. We are now in a period of time where we're working to ensure that the new legislation that is laid also includes and supports the needs of the Armed Forces community and the maintenance and the continuation of an Armed Forces National Commissioning Team, and how that will support everything that we've done, everything that we are looking at with the VCHA, with RCGP accreditation, with what we've done with our courage services, but particularly, as we're going to highlight today, more around how we embed the Armed Forces Covenant across integrated care boards, acute trusts, mental health trusts, all elements of the NHS, staff and patients, but also understand what that means and support and educate it through the amazing National Education and Training Programme, which we're so proud that already has been mentioned, and that Tim and the team and Guy and the team and Deborah Elliott and the team have been developing. And I was very lucky to see some of the products of those modules earlier on this week. And I'm not always an easy person to please. We have quite rightly got to have a high bar. And I have to say the work that is ongoing to make quite sure that we have a nationwide national education and training programme, as highlighted and launched by the Secretary of State Wes Streeting at the 80th VE celebrations, is absolutely going to give the work that it needs to over the next 2 to 3 years in embedding everything that's part of the NHS community, the military community, the patient community, but also making quite sure that the equity and the equality follows therein. So look, we are going to maintain that national team. We're going to maintain clinical expertise. We're absolutely going to maintain what that means around co-production with lived experience and the public patient voice. And we're also going to ensure that we are going to continue that commissioning of high quality evidence-based care. But what is important is that unique partnership relationship that we have with government departments, particularly the MOD, but many other government departments, in order to have a covenant, which is part of employment, in part of health, in part of housing, and part of families, really does support the fit for future element of the 10-year plan. So I hope that gives you the confidence that this will remain a high priority. This will provide the continuity of commissioning care and provision services, but ultimately we will share the load. That is our ambition. That is a job well done, when actually the sharing the load with the new 26 strategic ICBs, integrated care boards, and our military partners, and our lived experience and clinical bodies and charities is completely and utterly understood, so that nobody is going to be left behind or isn't asked, have you ever served, or whether you're a veteran of days or veterans of many, many years, and family members aside. Thank you. I'm just aware of the time, so I will ask for the next slide. Thank you very much. So one of the things that I think is important is that launch of the training and education programme. I know there's a presentation on it later, so I will make quite sure that I give the lion's share of the information to Guy and the team. But it's one of those elements that has come 100% from two key prongs of attack. As Dr. Jonathan Leach would always say, the best way of embedding across the whole of the NHS, what does this mean for armed forces and the military community, is to have elements of care and leadership and support for the armed forces NHS world, which is very bespoke and understands and asks questions. And you do not need to be an expert, but you become curious, but you also become much more patient and staff aware. And then you have an element that is the everyday part of all of our services that we and our families hope to get the best as we possibly can across all elements of the NHS, that also doesn't think that it's someone else out there that's doing this specialism to do with the armed forces, because like safeguarding, it is everybody's responsibility. And also they don't go, look, here's just a leaflet for the latest armed forces charity. Not that I have anything against, obviously, the collaboration and the support and the care coordination with brilliant charities, but it is not good practice for anyone within the NHS to feel that it isn't part of their assistance, their responsibility, their accountability, and also understanding the Armed Forces Covenant. So the training programme has come out of staff, trusts, ICBs, and most importantly, lived experience stories saying, look, we have got to get a constant element of education, training and curiosity to support the population health management, to drive down those health inequalities, the unwanted variation and disadvantage as it's highlighted in this slide, but also to make quite sure that people do understand the unique characteristics of the armed forces community and improve the health and well-being, but also understand that everyone is individual and not to cluster cluster everybody in a stereotype of the armed forces community. The work that we're doing around age, around LGBT, around women, around children and young people, around geography is absolutely key. When people have those healthcare needs and conditions, whether it's maternity pathways, whether it's cancer, strokes, whether it's military injuries, physical or mental health, they are individual to the person, as well as the elements that are part of no disadvantage if you understand the pathways that come from an armed forces family life or an armed forces career. So those statutory responsibilities as part of the Armed Forces Covenant is obviously the bedrock and the baseline that VCHA has been built on, that RCGP accreditation has been built on, that the Courage services has been built on, the maternity pathways, a single point of contact for families and carers, the work that we've particularly been done also around sexual abuse and the prevalence of some really difficult situations. But let's remember that most men and women who have been part of or in the armed forces community, who are in the best of health, are amazing men and women who transfer also to be brilliant careers in other parts of industry, the public sector, sport, the universe and beyond. But what we also have to do is make quite sure that we drive out that unwarranted variation, whether that's musculoskeletal, mental health, physical or everyday healthcare needs that sometimes can have an impact because I once served. Thank you. Next slide, just concluding, Guy, as well. So ultimately, I wouldn't go probably with any presentation, not as a minister, as kindly, helpfully already identified, to say that I think the NHS commissioned Operation Courage for mental health and wellbeing support for the armed forces, leavers, reservists and veterans, the Restore service around specialist care and treatment for veterans who have service-related physical health and trauma and health, physical trauma and health wellbeing problems, and the non-clinical service for veterans and their families for pre and post custody, both prison custody and police custody actually, have been groundbreaking in making quite sure that they are, yes, bespoke services, but they also integrate well with broader elements of the NHS, of charitable sectors. All of them can't run or work without the collaboration and the co-production and also the co-commissioning as part of those service benefits, and the peer support and lived experience and clinical expertise that they all hold as part of, whether those are CQC standards or whether those as part of clinical standards or whether those as part of making quite sure that we keep up to date with the 10-year plan and fit for future work. Okay, let's move on. I know there's a few stats, I think, just to follow, but ultimately are there just to emphasise, if evidence was ever needed, that both numbers and quality of those services are carefully monitored, are supported and ensured as part of accountability and responsibility like any other NHS service, but also done in partnership with our military colleagues, with our MOD and Defence Medical Services colleagues, our lived experience and our clinical teams. And they can do nothing but grow. Look, I'm going to make a bit of a plug here, particularly with the new Minister Online. Lovely to meet you, Louise. Really looking forward to working with you, and also to particularly Department of Health and Social Care Ministers as well. And we've had a lot of support from Wes Streeting and the team too. But these services are pretty cheap, let me say. I can say that to you. I know exactly how much we spend on them. And if we look at the cost per person and formula that the NHS often does on patient care and patient numbers, then we are hitting well above our weight and definitely raising the bar. I would really encourage any government and any change in the NHS to really care for and support not only the funding element, because we can do what we can do with whatever we are given, but ultimately we can do so much more as part of the integration and the embedding across other parts of the NHS, the public sector, and also obviously the charitable sector really benefiting from this at the same time. I'm not here to give a plug from anyone. I've been around too long to do that. What I am there is to champion what is good practice, what is championing good outcomes, but also obviously care for the individual. So lastly, just moving on to the last couple of slides, thank you very much. I think that strategic approach has to remain, because we need to do this at scale. We need to do this around equity, and we need to make quite sure that we keep plugging those gaps. ultimately, if we increase our knowledge and understanding, our effectiveness and our efficiency, and we absolutely know what the awareness is for the armed forces community, we don't pigeonhole people, but we keep asking the patients, asking the lived experience, asking the questions, sharing and delivering good practice, then I know we will continue to be a nation, both here and overseas, that will do the best we possibly can for our military community. So thank you very much. I think just the last slide is just about questions. Those will come later. I'm afraid I'm going to have to dip off on today. Look, it's lovely to be here. It's lovely to once again work with and champion this amazing piece of work. This conference has always led some groundbreaking stuff. Tim, last year we said we will do a new framework. We said we would do the National Education Programme. We have done all of that and more. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And what I would say is that there's very few people I'd share a trench with, but you would be one of them. So thank you very much for that sort of overview. I'd now like to really hand across to my boss, effectively, who is probably one of the hardest taskmasters I've actually ever encountered in my career, and that is saying something. Tim Briggs is an outstanding orthopaedic surgeon of his generation, and Tim is the national chair and lead for the VCHA, as you already alluded to. He is also the NHS England's National Director for Clinical Improvement and Recovery, and has been the driving force behind continuous improvement of healthcare across our armed forces community. And I think the other thing is Tim is very proud of being Honorary Colonel of 202 Multi-Role Regiment, Royal Army Medical Services. So, Tim, I'd like to hand over to you now, please, for your strategic overview of the VCHA.
Yeah, so Guy, thank you very much indeed for that. And Kate, I thought what you said was just absolutely brilliant. And what I really love about this is that, like Kate, I never served, but I've always had a real passion for the armed forces. And in my practice as an orthopaedic surgeon at the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital at Stanmore, thought we could do better for veterans, and really that's what really drove it. I was on manoeuvres at the weekend. I was up with Guy in Staffordshire on a training in a training area, working with our troops, reservists, but some of the finest people you'd want to know. And it gives me great pride to be their honorary colonel, but actually just cements the passion that I've got, that we've got to make sure we really do things that are right for veterans. Next slide, please. One of the things I heard at the weekend, which I thought was a really great phrase, and I'm going to bring it into the NHS, is do the right thing, not the easy thing. And I understand that is said by the military quite a lot, but that's so true of everywhere you work. And what we must do is bring that into everything we do. So this alliance started back in the day. I think that my first meeting was the Chavasse report was in 2014, and then it all led from there. But this was our purpose, really, about best practice, improving armed forces veterans care, whilst at the same time raising standards across the edge forwards. Why is that? Because all veterans are NHS users. So whatever we do and raise the bar for one group, by its very nature, it will improve the care for all. So it's been developed in partnership with the GIRF program, which I lead, which has now become the operational program for the NHS and QI. And also we work through the ROH, which is where I work, as also NHS England. Next one, please. So if I go back to the next slide, please. If I go back to the beginning, and the reason I wrote this was from clinical experience, just like the GIRF program, from what I was seeing in clinical practice. And what I wanted to do was, by raising the bar, make sure everybody knew what the Armed Forces Covenant, and we all abided by it. Wanted to improve care and rehab. Critical is transferring that learning, and we'll come on to that later on, both between the Defence Medical Services and NHS, and also provide a network trusts to look after our veterans with complex needs. Next one, please. So this is the team. At the top, you'll see there, Kate and myself, but actually it's a whole team approach. I was a team player throughout my career. I played quite a lot of rugby, and you're only as good as your team. And this team here is exceptional. And I just want to shout out for Guy, who came to me about, I'm amazed it's 5 years ago, Guy, it's incredible. But he has been the person I've been looking for some time, and I think leads it extremely well. And with all the other individuals, healthcare and also veterans that really also play their part. So again, many thanks to you. We wouldn't be there unless with your help. Next slide, please. So this was the framework, and this is what we do. We now, as the Minister said, we've now got all 205 trusts accredited, which is amazing. And I think Lord Dannatt said that as well. This was what we wanted people to do and what we do. And I think what the Lord Dannatt said is absolutely true. This is not a tick box exercise. What we want is to drive on continuous improvement. So we do a 1-year review, and then we do a 3-year reaccreditation, and you can see the 8 areas domains that we're looking at. Next slide. And this is just the sort of comments which I think are so powerful, and we've heard earlier in the talks this morning about lived experience of being in the armed forces, a spouse, etc. But also we're going to hear later a veteran story. But what about this? I just didn't realise how much I'd been carrying that pressure until it was relieved. An NHS staff member are talking about their trust's armed forces network. So again, we know we're making progress. Next slide, please. And again, what we've got is we've now built real support across healthcare and defence. Just look at this. Kate alluded to it. We're now joining it all up. And because Kate's in her position, I in my national position, we now have influence where we can make and embed those real changes. And so for me, this is our time. This is the opportunity to really drive and make sure we embed this into the NHS, DMS, etc. So it is part and parcel of what we do, and it's in our day-to-day business. Next slide, please. I was there with Guy at the Chelsea Hospital back in September when Amanda Pritchard and Major General Phil McNee re-signed the Armed Forces Covenant. And that was a really great thing for me to see the CEO of the NHS reaffirming our commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant and our veterans and serving. So again, we know where the NHS is. We're right behind this as we drive it. Next slide, please. So it started in, as I said, Shavas published in 2014. We then got a group together and we had our first workshop in 2017 now, that's 8 years ago, about agreeing what standards an exemplar trust would demonstrate. And that's where our manifesto came from and our 8 domains. And then we had, in November 2018, our first wave of 25 veteran-aware hospitals, which was fantastic. And look where we are today. And just remember, we've had COVID in the way in 2020. Throughout that, was slowed everything up. So great commitment from the NHS. Thank you very much. But also from my team, led by Guy, to really drive this. And it's been a lot of hard yards, a lot of hard work, but we're in such a good place now. So it's fantastic. Next slide. So there we have it. Veteran aware growth, 100% accredited, which I think is fantastic. But not only that, we're now in independent healthcare providers, including hospices, which have been accredited. So we're widening scope, which again does nothing but good for spreading that really good word about what we've got to do to make sure we look after our veterans. Next slide. So this is the big picture. And you can see that in England now, we've got 100%. If you look at the orange element in the middle of the top bars, you can see we're now doing 1-year reviews and 3-year reviews, and where we are, done 78% of 1-year reviews, 30% of 3-year reviews, and the trust where we want to do. If you look at in the devolved nations, we've got some successes in Wales, but at the moment we've got 14 trusts in Scotland, and we know we've got to work with those and in Northern Ireland to really get those across the line. Next ones, please. So this is where we are. We're on a journey for the 1-year reviews on the left and the 3-year accreditations. But as the General Lord Dannatt said, no tick box exercise. We want to see progress. We want to see evidence that what we've done and since we've accredited them, they've really made progress. Next slide, please. and also look at independent providers, hospices. We've got 105 engaged, credited 44. So again, a lot of sites to do, a lot of work to do. 170 hospices across the NHS footprint. So we've got to still do a lot of hard work to do yet, but we're making real progress. Next slide, please. So as Kate alluded to, and really I'm going to give you an overview because we're going to talk about this later on. The programme doesn't sit still. We develop it. We've got to include the whole community. Want a nationwide approach, so across England, but I want to make sure we've got the devolved nations. Independent valuation to understand how we support organisations, showing impact. For me, we've got to demonstrate that the VCHA and Veteran Aware absolutely delivers added value. And you look at the top right, data collection, which is going to be really, really important, both for our veterans who attend our trusts, but also rehabilitation. And it's got to be collaboration and co-production. And I think from what you've heard so far from the minister and also from Kate and myself, this is a joined up approach. So really excited about it. Next one, please. So what are the next steps in the future? Again, data. Data is key. I run the whole GIRF program on data, but then have clinical conversations with trusts, community, primary care, etc. That's what we've got to do. So it allows us and it gives us the tools and the data in which we can have those conversations to support improvement and also hold a lens up to areas that are not being improved and needs to. We clearly got to support our nation. I'm going to talk a little bit about armed forces further faster at the end. CQI standardization metrics, and again the training education program, which I'm really excited about, and it's being run through the VCHA, which I think is great. Next slide. So QI, quality improvement, absolutely. So we don't stand still. And so this is what we're doing in terms of accreditation, how we then improve that, how we get the reaccreditation and add value. And then we've got teams looking at that as well as working across the rehab, the independent healthcare and data project. So a lot going on. And what we want to make sure is, well, what are we missing? What's the gap analysis? But clearly, I want the data about tracking progress and achievement. So we can come next year again and show you what it's been achieved in the last 12 months. Because Kate was right. Since we spoke last 12 months ago, face to face, again, we've made massive progress. Next one, please. So embedding identification, the ASK program. So what are we here? That's asking, making sure we ask patients, making sure we ask everybody, have you or immediate family member ever served in the armed forces? This is going to be part of the data collect for the ORP, the Outcome Registry Program, which I chair with Ming Tang in NHSE. And it's going to be a massive outpatient. It's going to be a massive program of registries that really provide the data that we need across not just veteran care, but across everything we do in the NHS. And we commenced this in September, which included 36 NHS trusts for the PERS protocol. So fantastic work. Next slide, please. And again, the rehabilitation project led by Linus, making progress. We got veteran aware therapy champions in 75 trusts. 250 veterans have access to support pack and 188 in service training video views. Next steps, we've got to map the evidence, a scoping review of chronic pain management strategies. That I think that's going to be really critical for something that we're going to have to, which is I think is a really important need. Next one, please. And this is what I'm doing currently. I run a number of programs within the NHS called Further Faster, where we've looked at outpatients. We've looked at a group of 20 trusts in the Midlands and North England, trying to reduce the number of those patients who are economically active on waiting lists, so we get them back to work. And I wanted to do a Further Faster Armed Forces. I'm in discussion with the MOD and the Surgeon General at the moment. There are 3,700 serving armed forces personnel who have yet to have an appointment, having been waiting 18 weeks for an appointment with a condition, whether it's about ears, musculoskeletal, etc. And what I want to do is I want to fast track those, and we're working with the MOD about how to do that. So can we maximize outpatient appointments? How are we going to meet the demand capacity? and how can we enhance elective surgery so that these armed forces personnel are there ready to go back to the background, back to their regiment or wherever it is, so we can all play our part. So this is absolutely happening at the moment, and those are live discussions, and we hope we'll be able to announce something very shortly. Next slide, please. So this just shows the significant growth and development of where we've come from, and I think it needs no more explanation. It's just a heck of a lot of hard work by dedicated people and the team to really drive change and get that. So well done to the whole VCHA team, and most importantly, to all you people who work in the NHS, all you people who work in care homes and hospices, who really want to be part of this, and now really get and understand what this is all about. So I can't thank you enough. We can suggest what we do, but it's the people on the ground, helped by our teams, that really have to deliver. So fantastic. And we're going to hear some great stuff this afternoon about lived-in experience, etc., and what you've done in the NHS. Next slide, please. So this is the Armed Forces Healthcare Training Education Programme. Next slide. And this is the aim. And again, Kate's mentioned it already earlier today. This is a no-brainer. And I'm really delighted that we'll be leading that and working with NHS England. And I think we're going to be hitting the ground running, I hope, in November. And I've already met the team on a number of occasions. I've seen what they're doing. It just looks fantastic. Next slide. And this is the team that are going to deliver it. It's interesting, a real mix of healthcare professionals and armed forces veterans, which I think makes it a really powerful group because they learn from each other. And when I've met them to go through some of their early videos, making people aware, the stories they tell actually are fantastic. And what's great about them is they're personal. And you heard earlier a day from Sarah, this is personal experiences. And they bring that to these videos, which are really humbling, I have to say, and makes you want to make sure we do this in a really joined up way. Next slide. So in summary, that's where we are. We've come a long way. We're widening scope. We're delivering. You're going to hear about what we're doing later on after coffee. But I'm proud to be chair of this. And if you said to me, Tim, did you think this is where it would go when you started it? The answer would be no. I didn't realise we would get to where we are. But we've now, what I would say, crossed the Rubicon. We've pushed that boulder uphill. It's now really gathering pace. We're working so well with Kate and her team in NHSE, working well across MOD, and my team is absolutely top drawer, and I want to thank them all really from the bottom of my heart for helping us really deliver this vision that I had all those years ago. And I couldn't have done this without them, and importantly all of you who's here today working in the NHS. It is just fantastic. So let's continuous quality improvement. Let's make it even better. So when we come back next year, there'll be more and more great stories to tell. And we know that we can leave a great legacy and go home at night. We feel that we've done a great job. Next slide. That's it. So thank you very much indeed for that. And it's quite humbling to talk about it. But again, thank you for all your support. It's been fantastic. More to do, but let's get on with it. Guy.
Great. Thanks, boss. And again, I think on behalf of the armed force community, thank you for everything you do. It is really appreciated. And the second person I'd probably share a trench with would be you, Tim, actually. Right, moving on. It's coffee break now. I've got someone joining from the States, so we are on a specific timeline, but I'd like everyone please back to their laptops or computers by 11:50. So 11:50, please. Thanks very much. And there will be a rolling spool that we'll put on now, which involves all that has been, provided by our partners. So grab a brew and then listen into some of the stuff, really good stuff that's going on right across the sector. So on that, I will now mute and see you all back at 11:50. Thank you.